Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, hosted by Echo and brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. In this episode, we're diving into the world of simulation training in HEMS with special guest Jonathan Corolla. From high-fidelity mannequins to low-cost, high-impact solutions, we explore how simulation is evolving and why it's critical for preparing crews to perform under pressure. Jonathan brings a wealth of experience in crafting realistic scenarios that connect with clinicians and improve outcomes in the field. We'll talk about the challenges of building effective training programs, the power of creative problem solving, and why advocacy and buy-in are key to making it all work. Whether you're in the air or on the ground, this conversation is all about training smarter, pushing boundaries, and staying mission ready. Thank you to our sponsors, Metro Aviation, Night Flight Concepts, and Precision Aviation Group.
Welcome to the Valor Flight Crew podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts and Vertical Valor magazine. Produced in partnership with Echo, Every Coast Helicopter Operations, the Valor Flight Crew podcast promotes the personnel and life-saving equipment behind helicopter air ambulance services. Join hosts Mike Fideli and Blake Schreider for in-depth interviews and expert insights from air medical personnel, pilots, communication specialists, and maintenance crews who play critical roles in airborne emergency response.
Line 1 accepting.
Copy, line 1, gotcha, accepting. You're going to be talking to Red Feather 1 on LCEMS.
You have to ask 3 questions when you're going to do any education on any level. I don't care if it's a mandatory training, an on-the-job training, a simulation, whatever. And it's, why is it important to me? Why is it important in general? And is this going to change my clinical care? And if you can't answer those 3 questions pretty easily, you really need to rethink, okay, then why are we doing the simulation?
And I feel like if those clinicians can't relate to each of those 3 things, they're not going to walk away from that simulation feeling like this was anything that affected them in a positive way. Like those 3 things have to be in place.
It feels wasted. You were like, well, great. I was just here. I learned nothing from this. Thanks a lot.
Exactly. And we've all had those classes. And like before I do anything, I ask myself those 3 questions. And that's how I design all my education. That's how I design all my simulations. It's how I do everything with education in general. Even some of our mandatory programs we have here that we have to put out, because it's mandated through a hospital system, the state mandates it, whatever, you still have to answer those 3 questions to make it palatable for the providers that we put it out to. Because, great, it's mandatory. That don't mean a damn to any of us.
Right.
And, that's a difficult thing as an educator and a simulator is how do you make people give a damn about it? And I think if you can answer those 3 questions, or at least find the answers to those 3 questions and present it to them with the simulation, with your pre-brief, with your debrief, your pre-education, whatever it may be, while there may still be resistance, that's still going to put you on the biggest path to success that you can have.
We recently just did a cadaver lab for our entire agency. And I think this is probably our 3rd year in a row of being able to not only find the money and the ability to do it, it's mandatory for all paramedics. And you hear okay, I got to go to this. But I think each year it just gets better and better. And I think each year, more and more people are finding the success with it. They enjoy it. And like you said, it really answers those 3 questions. And I can tell you as an organization that, we depend on taxpayer dollars. And, as far as our ground response. So really trying to find those ways, to make it impactful for everybody, but staying within a budget. And, it's one thing to spend the money on it, but to show the relevance and to show where it's impactful to now you can do it again next year and then the year after that, and it becomes in place. So, that's maybe one example But what are other examples that agencies, organizations, whatever, how can they maximize the training on that budget, but show that it's relevant? What are the other ways that programs and clinicians can really enhance that training and utilize either things that they have or use things that are affordable instead of spending, $200,000, like you said, on a mannequin to be like, this is part of it.
Yeah. No, so a couple of things come to mind, and some are kind of intricate, some are super simple, right? So stop the bleed trainers are incredibly expensive. I think a little more expensive sometimes, like all training equipment it is. But like you guys your agency does a lot of traumas or a lot of bleedings, and you have to do a lot of tourniquet application, gunshot wounds, etc. You can make those. You take a styrofoam pool noodle and a piece of PVC pipe, and you can make a stop the bleed style trainer right there. And you can put IV tubing running along the top of the PVC pipe and have it on the internal lumen of the pool noodle. And then when you apply your tourniquet, you can do bleeding control that way. And it's simple things like that. And, it's like, and even taking a CPR mannequin, an intubation head or whatever, and doing training on like eye irrigation. If you're in an area that has a lot of like industrial sites and, eye injuries may be common, or, like I worked in coal country, so eye injuries were fairly common for a multitude of reasons. Right.
Right.
We had one that a guy had a roof bolt chain come back right across his right orbit and the bridge of his nose, completely ruptured the right orbit of his eye. And how many people do you know that would be like, oh man, I can manage that right now?
Right.
Right. And that just takes
not many.
No. And you can go to, Five Below and get like a little plastic skeleton head and turn that into a trainer of here's how you stabilize eye injuries. Here's how you would bandage that, like multiple different ways. And to me, that's really a simple and easy way to maximize on training and skill that you have on hand for a very low cost. And, if you want to get really intricate and you have those really creative people, 3D printers are amazing. People are 3D printing, trachs now. Yeah. One of our providers 3D printed syringe pump mounts for our pumps. So you can find stuff to do with that. And that is relatively cheap depending on the route you go. But say you want to really maximize, right? Say you want to do something really awesome. You want to do like a scene to a load to the truck, but you have nowhere to do it. You don't have the station space, the office space. You don't have it. Depending on how creative you can be, you can take PVC pipe and make a 10 by 10 room and just put drapes around it, throw some chairs or a stretcher in there to act as a bed and some furniture. There's your room in the back of the house that you got to get the patient out of.
Yeah.
And then it's movable. And you can do all sorts of things with it and convert it into multiple different things you need. And the sky's the limit, and it's only limited by creativity and imagination. And for me, it's fun because it's stuff like I like to piddle like that. I like to figure things out and just work with it. Like I made a SCBA trainer for my fire department back home, and I made it because I did a training where they had like wires and rebar and everything through it, and it was a hose mace trainer, and you had to crawl through it to and get through without getting stuck. And it involves you having to take like your SCBA off, keeping your mask on and like sliding your SCBA and your axe beside you, because if you didn't, like something was going to catch you. And like, I took probably, $100, $150 worth of spare wood that I just had laying around the house. Took me 2 days, got some hooks, got some wire, a couple things of tomato, and I went and bought a few tomato steaks, and they had this big, huge trainer that you can do. Like it's all about what you're willing to do and the imagination you have, I think.
So I think when we talk about, a lot of this training, we end up focusing on the medical side of the house, right? Like we focus on the EMTs, paramedics, nurses. And it, in most worlds, I think obviously that works, right? But when we talk about HEMS, obviously it's a little bit different situation. You have your pilots included in there, maybe your maintainers, your comm specs, and then the integration with your EMS systems. What are some ways that you can see kind of the integration of the entire team, so it's not just on the medical side of the house, that can make some of this simulation more relevant for everyone? Because obviously, if we train as a team, we're going to succeed as a team, right? If we're training all of these things individually and we're not really aware of what the other parties that are involved in that team are doing, we may not be as successful or as diligent within that team dynamic. So how do you promote or utilize simulation for the entire team dynamic in a lot of these programs out there?
So that's a really cool thing. Not that I've thought about it in depth or anything, but there's a couple ways, right? And the simplest one that comes to mind, since you mentioned comm specs, pilots, and everything, because it's a little difficult to spool up an aircraft and be like, you're going to go respond to this mock scene. Can we do it? Sure, but the amount of times that we'd be able to do it to really make it relevant, I don't think we could. What you can do, though, and I'll use Lifeline as an example because we're a little unique. We have a primary and a secondary channel, and the secondary channel doesn't get used that often. And I don't think, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, gets monitored all that much other than us. But even at that, if you didn't have a radio channel, you can use walkie-talkies and you can get headsets for them. And you can put your comm specs in a situation where they have to dispatch a flight and it's a scene flight, or the flight's already dispatched, aircraft's on scene, your pilot's getting ready to lift, but suddenly you get a chip light. Now you have to go through the conversation of the pilot with the comm specs and the crew using, the radios, the walkie-talkies, whatever it is you use on how to mitigate that. And there may not even be a patient scenario case involved, right?
Right.
And you're just utilizing
operations.
Yeah. You're just sitting in the aircraft.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I was getting at is, how do you make those kind of things realistic or train as a team so that it includes all team members as opposed to just something that's medically focused?
And that would just, the crew sitting in the helicopter and you're doing a quick drill. Is it super in depth? No. But it does give you that repetition of, okay, this chip light's on. What are we doing?
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140 plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
That quickly replicates, Mike, what you're saying. It doesn't have to be a medical training, but how often does that happen where you load the patient now and you have a sick patient, and of all times, like you said, Murphy's Law, right?
Right,
Something
exactly.
happens, like, oh, guess what? You guys got to figure out how to get there. Oh, but by the way, we're in the middle of nowhere, so we don't have radio comms, so how do you train that? And I think that's such a huge, important aspect to bring to our world.
Or suddenly you have, an emergency where you have to land in the middle of a field somewhere with a patient on board. How are you coordinating that whole process? And it may not even be about the actual care that's being provided, but how do you maintain the appropriate level of care for your patient while also, being task saturated with other aspects operationally of that flight?
Yeah. And how do you get help when you need it?
If you want to make that high fidelity now with zero money involved or a high fidelity environment, you put a patient on that litter, you take an iSimulate monitor, an event, you crank the alarms up to the max, have it beeping and going off in the background.
That never happened.
It never happened. That's why they make silence buttons.
Right.
And you have your two crew members in the back of the aircraft. You have your pilot up front. The aircraft's battery's on, so the ICS works, and then they can communicate back and forth. And now you're working with the pilot on, okay, I don't have comms really with anybody, maybe someone local, but I do have like a sat phone that I can use to get a hold of the comm center. Now let's use the sat phone, talk to the comm center, talk to the pilot. Where's our closest facility from where we're at now? like, yeah, Hershey or, Baltimore or Philly, they're all out of the way now. We're going to small town USA Podunk ER and going to hope for the best at this point.
Yeah. In my right mind, I would not have come up with, 90% of these things that you're MacGyvering together to make work. But obviously, your brain and my brain work very differently, which is why I think we worked very well together when we were on,
but we
the
think
aircraft
the same
together.
way, which is also funny.
Right. We have a common goal, but how we get there is very, very different. And so I think that you need to like harness the energy of those people that maybe think about things in a different way to truly figure out how to make these simulation trainings relevant and purposeful, and direct that training in a way that is going to be beneficial for all parties involved.
Yes. And it's funny. I'll do planning meetings or stuff, and I'll come up with these off the wall situations that may happen. And then, I get the weird look like you're crazy. Like this
I
would
can
never,
only imagine the looks you get in those rooms.
Me and Mike have had these conversations before too. And like, this would never happen. And then like, oh, it happens. And
yeah.
And then I just sit there with this smile on my face, and Mike's like, shut up, let's go. He's like, I'm not talking to you anymore.
There's certain things we do not talk into existence.
But yeah, so it's the same thing in those planning meetings, but then, it may not happen that time, but later on down the road, it happens. And you're like, someone mentioned that.
So I think, when we talk about simulation itself, and you were talking about the justification of it before. And so how do you plan, budget, and sell your organization on the importance of simulation? And I would like to think that there are some metrics that can be utilized when you go into having some of these conversations and planning for the future and designing your simulation. And so how do you, like, as a simulation specialist within an organization, or as you're building a simulation program, what kind of goals or metrics do you try to work towards or keep in mind or monitor throughout the ongoing training that's there, so that you can ensure that this is something that is being beneficial?
Yeah. So there's a couple things that you can look at. And it really just depends on the need of your agency. Just off the quick, top of my head, you look at return of investment for, new hires, right? Your orientation process is huge with simulation. You bring them in, you test them, you see where they're at. You bring them off, you test them, see where they're at, and you give them the same scenario, give them the same exam, same written exam, same scenario, maybe a different patient population, but overall the same, right? And you gauge them. How good did they do when they started, and did they rise when they came off orientation? So that gives you a good metric there, and ultimately you can trace that now to patient outcomes in the future. And that type of training and continual training gets a lot of buy-in from your people. So your frontline staff are more satisfied because they feel adequately prepared. They feel like they were prepared for the job. So they're not as apt to be like, oh, well, this just sucks, I'm out the door. And then, you just wasted, $20,000 to $50,000, through orientation and equipment and everything for this provider that's now, just gone, and they're going down the road trained, fully good to go for somebody else. So return of investment would probably be the first and easiest one that would come to mind, because it's much easier to retain a person than it is to train them and then retrain somebody else.
Right.
And it also has a good play in QA-based education, or QA/QI-based education. So you're looking at a metric of how great is our first-time success rate for intubation? How great is our third attempt? And we look at that and we see what the problem is. And then we pull those charts, we evaluate them and see, is there a common occurrence in that has caused all of these patients to have a missed first attempt and taken all the way up to a third? Now, that's something we can work with and build. Is
Sure.
it they're not head positioning? Are they not suctioning? Do we just suck at intubation? Is it an equipment problem? Like, what is it? You find that, and then you can build your education to give not only now continuing education, but now that we've done the continuing in person or virtual or whatever, now let's apply it.
It's also those real life things that are program specific and things that can be drawn out from the statistics or the metrics that you're trying to monitor and improve upon within the organization.
Another quick and easy one is STEMI recognition. And I'm
Sure.
not saying flight clinicians can't read 12 leads, but some can't, and you still have that problem. That's another easy metric of why are we missing these?
But it's a skill too, right? Like if you don't use it, you're going to lose it.
Are we, do we know what Wolf Parkinson's white is? Do we know what Brugada looks like? Do we know what, a delta wave or a U wave or all these other waves that you get look like? And we can measure that and we can see, STEMI activation is your easiest one to look at, right? But now we can build education off of it. Now we can also go through scenarios and do it. And creating a chest pain STEMI scenario is super easy. And, you're a paramedic or you're a nurse, be like, well, yeah, that's a STEMI. Okay, great. It's a STEMI. Where's it at? What artery is it located at? Where do we need to go? What is their chance of, success with, cannulation? What are some more in-depth things into it now that play into our care? And it's not just, that, oh, well, I can put a 12 lead on it. It's a STEMI. Let's test some knowledge there too of what all goes into it. Great. You have ST elevation, but now you throw a left bundle branch block in there. Do you know how to do like scarbosas or modified scarbosas? And, that is getting really deep in the weeds on some 12 lead application and evaluation, but that's how you can build this stuff and then directly apply it to your patient of, you're going to call a STEMI alert on that. You get this from an EMS crew that's BLS and this is what you get. What are you going to do?
When we talk about, and the things that you've brought up about, really immersing and trying to get this simulation going forward and having a good practical application to what we're doing, there's programs that they might just not have access to it, right? Or let's say you write out the business plan, you write out everything, and then you're told, yeah, well, not right now. Sorry, we just can't do that, right?
Maybe next year.
Right. Yeah, maybe next year. Right. How do you get other stakeholders involved in, partnering up with to help with the training, right? So not only what benefits us as providers, which should hopefully directly benefit the patient, right? But getting the other stakeholders involved in that continuum of care in that high fidelity training, it benefits them as well, right? So how do we get them, our other providers like the hospital systems, right? Or, you have to utilize a third-party service for transferring, right? Or, whatever it may be. How do we get the other stakeholders to help us out with that buy-in, with that training? And how do we show them the downstream effects of, how the patient can thrive, return to normal life? And it's a win for everybody, right? The overall win is that the patient has a great outcome. On the flip side of that, there's people also benefit along the way: jobs, health system, access to care, right? So how do we get them to buy in on that?
So I think it's all about relationships and knowing the people who to talk to. We all have a person that a guy that knows a guy that knows a guy, right?
Right.
And it's knowing the right people to get those conversations started. And it's being able to build good relationships. You can't be, and I don't know if I can say this on the podcast, but you can't be an asshole and expect to have good relationships with your hospital system or your, maybe your local, township that, may donate to your EMS agency or your HIMSS agency, or, you have to be approachable, and you can't be timid. You have to be able to ask the hard questions. You have to be able to have the hard conversations of, this is what we need. Our patients are going to benefit from it. You're going to benefit from it. And if you can build that out and show how that not only is going to improve patient care and also positively affect the bottom line, that's the starting process of it, and shows how it works. Like, yeah, there's money up front that we got to have, but here's how it's going to affect us in 6 months, in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
And you're going to start having those conversations. Unfortunately, and this is the part where people really get burnt out, is that takes time. It's not like we're going to have a conversation with the director of nursing for the ER and the medical director for the ICU and be like, okay, we're going to get you this money. Mm-hmm. You know, this is a war of attrition. And, you know, you've got a long 6 month to a year ahead of you. I mean, even
be prepared to hear the words no.
Yes, a lot. And
more than once. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big thing. Like, you know, it took me a year to build that simulation ambulance because I had to justify why we're going to spend $130,000. And it wasn't, I just had to justify it to my bosses. We had to justify it to the Bureau of EMS because they're the ones that help supply that grant funding. And we were told no. And we were given all of these things. And I had to go through and get letters of why this mannequin is this much and what benefits and how it benefits people. And, you know, if I'd have just been like, oh, well, I got told no, so I guess that's it.
That's what it cost. They said no, so we got to figure it else out, right?
Yeah. So, yeah, you're going to get told no. A lot, like Fidali said, but you got to be tenacious, and you gotta want it and believe it, and believe that it's the right thing to do, and push forward. Now, you have to be aggressive, but you also have to be polite. You have to be professional, and you have to come with knowledge. You can't go off half-cocked with, you know, well, I took a simulation class and I watched some webinars and like, I can do this. You know, you have to know the science. You have to see what's been published, what's out there, how's it work, who's it worked for, what are other models. And, the biggest advice I could probably give is find a program that's similar to yours that does simulation. See what they did and reach out to them.
Right.
Because I can almost guarantee they have the same hardships that you're having and can give you some benefit and give you good information. And, you know, now if you foster that good relationship with them, now not only do you have models and resources, you have an entire program to be like, hey, let me bring this person in to have this meeting with us that did it and succeeded, that can give you the good, the bad, the ugly, what worked, what didn't. And maybe we can miss some of those steps, learning from them and moving forward, and ultimately, once again, save money and affect that bottom line in a positive way.
Yeah. A lean, if you have that lean budget, but you're maximizing every penny of that and it's successful versus, well, I saw this, I tried this, and I'm sorry, I wasted 10 grand on something that I thought would work. Yeah. Sorry.
But I feel like if there's buy-in from multiple parties or agencies or, you can almost build it for the needs of not just an individual agency, but a community, and be able to really make it an outreach type venture that benefits more than just, one particular group.
And something that HIMSS has gotten away from in areas that I've seen that we need to get back into is engaging our communities.
Absolutely.
The people that we serve, right? Go to those local townships, go to those local city halls, and like, this is what we would like to do. This is how it affects you. This is what it can do for you in the long term. Can you help? Even if it's a super small amount or a letter of support to make the hospitals or our agency say that like the community supports this. It doesn't always have to be money, but having the community as buy-in, having your local representative buy-in, that goes a long way when you present this to the people that do give you the money. because now they really see that, like, oh, they have done their homework. They're not just coming and frivolously asking for money, because I don't do finance. That's not my realm of things. But I don't necessarily always think that the finance people are like, no, just to be malicious or mean. I think they are just very finicky and, picky about where their dollars go to.
Right.
And they don't, and it's their job not to let people just, go off and spend, $250,000 for no reason.
Right.
Yeah.
So that shows them like they've done their homework, they've done their research. And like, you gotta understand too, people have to understand is that the people that we're selling this to know next to nothing about what it is that we do.
So perfect world scenario, right? Perfect world scenario. You get whatever you want for simulation.
Don't give me that power.
Oh gosh.
Don't worry, I never would, but I'm picking your brain for the moment. Where would you like to see this type of training or education go to in the future? Like what's on the horizon? How do we take this to the next level and make this even bigger and better and badder?
There's a couple ways. Virtual reality is going to be the way of training in the future. It's not there yet, and we're probably still a good decade away from it being like where we want it to. But the stuff we can do with it now is pretty amazing. And, when I did my simulation class, I got to do a virtual reality surgical simulation where you're suturing up inside of a incision and you're like suturing up an organ. And like it was set up exactly the way the machine is that the surgeons would use to do this. The touch, the feel, all of it. And it was just a super eye-opening experience for me of like, this is super static in the sense of all I'm doing is one skill, and that's suturing. But like to get to experience the fine motor, because you use 2 fingers and your thumbs to do this, to work this machine. And to get that sensation of this is how they do it through this narrowed view went a whole long way of appreciation of some of the stuff they do at their level. So if I would have my perfect world, it would be a fully stocked, high fidelity simulation ambulance with the mannequin, but you're incorporating VR into that to fully immersify you in that situation.
It's just crazy to me. Like I was never a video games kid, but like, I feel like I would probably struggle with a lot of those things. But I think, it's crazy to me to think of like, that there is a mannequin we can make that we're wearing VR goggles and intubating a patient. And when we're looking around, it incorporates the ambulance that's there in front of us, plus the touch and feel of actually intubating that particular patient and going through like that. To me, it would be amazing. But at the same time, that's kind of crazy. Like, I think I would still, I think it's on the wave of the future. I totally get the importance behind it, but like, man, that's a lot.
It is. And, I got to do a VR session where you were standing in the center of any piece of anatomy in the body. So like you could be inside the heart, you could be inside the brain or the lungs. And it was so in detail that you could have it set up and watch how the lungs progress with lung cancer or COPD, or see how the heart valves open and close, or see what a stenosed valve did, inside. And like, you could even, like, if you were in the brain, you could watch the synapses fire off and the electrical impulses to give you that this is what's happening inside of us and the things we affect. And it's extremely disorienting at first, right? Because, you're just involved in this. And, I'm a nerd in the sense of like, I like science fiction and all those things anyway. So like, to me, this is just fascinating and cool. But like, to be able to do that on a call, and like, ITLS is getting to that point. Really? I've not taken it yet, but I do know they have VR headsets that they can set up like MCIs where you have virtual patients laying on the ground there. You have headsets that the controllers have that can mimic like moaning and screaming and all the things like, and it's just super cool and immersive. And then, to add on that, add the recording equipment so that, you can see it all while it's happening. You can do your annotations as the simulation is going on, and then you can debrief and educate on it. Nothing that short of $1 million probably wouldn't cover, but who's counting at that point?
That's, not only does that show, that with AI and this VR and everything that's coming out, like the possibilities are almost endless other than money, right? Or, how far can you stretch it? But then, so let's say you do that, but then how do you maintain that? So how do you maintain to keep that training relevant? Because that's so you get the perfect world, you get $1 million to do that. It's a lot of money up front, but then how do you keep that going? So how do you keep that, relevant? Like what do you implement? Policies, procedure, protocols, how do you keep that to where, okay, we spent $1 million on this, but what does it cost to maintain that? And how do you keep the people coming back for that? Because does it become, okay, we're doing my VR again, here I am, I'm going to do the thing versus the hands-on, right? Or what? So how do you keep that going?
When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your six. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
So I think it's a lot like anything else. From an operational standpoint, you have to keep the people running it relevant and up to date. They have to have the consistent training, and that's a cost of it itself. So you're probably looking, I would think, just spitballing, if you had your full-fledged simulation going on all year round, you're probably looking at $250,000 a year just to keep it running. And that's training people, that's paying the people to run it, that's paying the providers to be there. That's, not just, let's make sure this is maintained and good to go. That's payroll for people. That's your continuing education. That's all of that. And I wish I had a more concrete, but I would still, I feel fairly comfortable saying that, I would think $250,000 would be that ballpark if you incorporated everything into it, looking at maintenance on the vehicle, the fuel cost and all of that. But to really, it is. And that's, brings me into this, and we'll get back to the relevance aspect. One of the biggest things that I read in all of these peer-reviewed articles was that one of the reasons EMS has struggled is not only is that upfront part difficult and training and cost, but who maintains it? How is it maintained? With like a simulation center in a hospital, the hospital does that, right? You have hospital dollars, put aside for that.
It can't be stagnant. It's something that, that if you just have the same scenario every single time somebody goes in, right,
nobody's going to
that's not doing anyone any good. Like, you have to continue to evolve along the way and make this something that's relevant.
But let's face it, I can come up with some pretty good scenarios consistently.
But let's say you get leadership changes, management changes, people come in and they'll all of a sudden be like, listen, so it's $1 million up front, $250K a year. We can't do that.
Yeah, no.
Here's $100,000. Make it work. How do you combat that? Some of that you can't, right? But
yeah. So some of it, ultimately, as bad as it is, you can't combat. You can try, and you can. One of the ways that I would think that your first defense is that, what have you done so far? How well is it documented? And what improvements have you seen since, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because everything has to be not only validated, but revalidated. Like, we can't be like, poof, stamp, this scenario is validated. We never have to look at it again, because nothing ever changes. But, so it's like scenarios, like everything has to be revalidated. And I think that as long as a program is, once again, the three questions: why is it important? Why is it important to me? And how is it going to change my clinical practice? If we can sustain that and verify it through our documentation, through our metrics, and show that, like, this is where it started and this is how our care was when it started, to here is a year later and where our care is now and our metrics are now, that's your first line of defense, right? Showing what you've done, showing the improvement in employee engagement since it's been done. How have our interactions with the hospital been done? How is that collaboration, that team building, have our regular HIMSS operations gotten better, right? Are we better at CRM because of it? Are we better at mitigating in-flight emergencies, or, maybe not an in-flight emergency, but in-flight mishap or a complication, if you will? Are we better at discussing that? Are our pilots better for it? Are we better for it? Show those things first as your first line of, okay, this is why you can't do that.
Yeah.
And, you have to fight that good fight. And once again, you got to be a little tenacious. You have to stay professional, but you can't back down from that. And for some people, that's really hard to do. Mike will never say this, but, I struggle with that sometimes myself. Like, I'm pretty tenacious with things. And once I set my mind to it, it's done. It's just now I got to work out the details. But I don't do that as easily as it kind of comes across sometimes. Like, there's a real workup and a struggle that comes with that. And then I reevaluate afterwards. Was it too much? Was it too little? So it's a learned skill, and balancing it is even harder. So be prepared for no, but also don't necessarily be prepared to take no for the answer.
Right.
Fight the good fight and put your work into it. And then ultimately, if you have all of this supporting documentation, and then I would also once again go back to, if it really gets to that point and it's going to be a fight, go back to your community investors and your stakeholders. Like, these people want this, and this is a good idea for us. Go back to your hospital and get their buy-in too. But ultimately, if it's still like, no, it's not happening, then you're going to have to really reevaluate how you fund the program. What now is a priority? What, how often do we want to use this, $1 million piece of equipment? Do we want to keep it on the road every day like we did before? Do we want to quarterly utilize it? Is there times that people can come to it and do like just-in-time training and get to use it while they're on shift maybe? Like, you've really got to start reevaluating that. And it goes back to, once again, how imaginative and creative are you in making it work? And you got to have an open mind.
Yeah. Open mind, creativity, ability to MacGyver things.
Right.
and
all things that are a
small budget.
It's all about being resourceful, right?
Yeah.
Something we do on a daily basis, but you got to do it in a different way now to make things work and to keep it relevant. And I think that, obviously it takes a special kind of person with the way that you think about things, and also your abilities to be creative, both, mentally and physically, to make these things happen are certainly imperative to all of that. I think that, we're starting to see a whole evolution of this coming within the industry. And I think that we're moving in the direction that is really going to change drastically in the very near future, just by some of the things that you talked about there, Jonathan. And I think it's exciting on one hand. I'm terrified in the other, because I just don't know that I'm 100% on board with the whole AI, VR technologies yet. But the thing is, I'm not going to have a choice in the matter. Like, it is going to be the wave of the future. I fully understand, recognize that. So we'll see where this goes. But I think it's very interesting to see the transition that has happened so far and what's to come.
No, I agree. And, I was super excited to present this topic at Echo this year. And I'm even more excited and, about, doing it now. Cause like, this has just really reignited that passion that's there, and it's really brought it to a head again. And I just love talking about it. I love dealing with it, and I can't wait to see everybody at Echo and present it there too. And I hope that the people there have that same love and passion that I do. And I think for me, my personal goal with it is, if I can get you as my student, or the candidate, or whoever you are taking the simulation, to know and feel the love and passion that I have for education and simulation and wanting people to do better, then I have done my part.
Sure.
because now you leave with something more tangible. And I hope that would give someone more buy-in and tell other people about it. And, it grows from there.
And I think right now somewhere Christian's ears are ringing because we said AI.
100%.
I'll probably get a text here in just a moment.
I need to check my phone to see if he's texted me.
You
too.
should, yeah. He's going to be like, "Hey, I heard you were talking about it."
Did someone say AI? It's like the dad thought when someone the dad sense when someone touches the thermostat.
Yep, 100%.
Wait, what? But I think this just really shapes that home that we are advocating and continuing to grow this industry and leading from the front and not from behind a desk. And I think, Jonathan, this is a true testament to hearing. I'll relocate to Pennsylvania. I've said that like 4 times today. I'm sick of the heat. I'd love to come up there. But I think that this really drives home such a great need in our industry. It's never going away. We are constantly going to be there. And as long as we can advocate so much for ourselves and we can do it responsibly and do it well, I think that there's no limits to where this can truly go and help us really get that care to our patients. So thank you for giving us that insight. I learned a couple things. I'll try to implement, here locally. We'll see what happens. I don't know that I'm that handy. So
I have faith in you, Blake.
And the cool thing about it is that you don't have to be intricate, right? You see all these videos of all of these dovetail things that people do with woodworking that are just showing off, that have way more money than they'd have since. But
yeah,
as long as you can put together basic structures and things like that, you can do just about any of it.
I can try.
And listen, you try until it works. I mean,
that's it.
Fake it till you make it. Something like that.
Yep. I support it.
Well, if you guys do want to hear more about this topic, make sure you come to Echo Louisville. Come see Jonathan at his presentation there. Otherwise, certainly can reach out to any of us here at the Valor Flight Crew podcast. We can get you in touch with Jonathan for more information on simulation and creating that for your agency on a low fidelity budget. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for coming and talking with us today. I agree. It has been a very enlightening conversation to happen. I look forward to a lot of the changes that you're going to implement at our organization in the very near future and how that integrates with both EMS and critical care worlds. So thank you very much for coming out and doing that. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you guys for having me. I've really enjoyed this.
Also, thank you to our guests out there and our listeners for their continued support of the Vertical Helicast platform and the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys next time.
We'll see you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message from our sponsors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Metro Aviation. Metro Aviation, the world's largest family-owned aeromedical operator, offers comprehensive aircraft services with 140-plus aircraft in over 25 states. The Completion Center installs medical and law enforcement kits and avionics, serving diverse aviation needs including offshore, utility, VIP, and corporate sectors.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
When every second counts, trust Night Flight Concepts to keep you mission ready. With advanced night vision technology, FAA-certified repair services, and expert training, we've got your 6. Visit nightflightconcepts.com to learn more.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Valor Flight Crew podcast. A huge thanks to Jonathan Corolla for sharing his insights on the power and the challenges of simulation training in HEMS. If you're part of the crew or just passionate about pushing the boundaries of emergency care, remember, it's all about practicing hard, getting creative, and never settling for good enough. High-fidelity simulation isn't about having the latest and greatest tools and resources, but more about the relevance, relatability, and importance of the training. We hope you enjoyed this conversation And don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your team. Until next time, keep training smart, stay mission ready, and fly safe out there. We'll see you next time.